This episode is brought to you by EA Sports NHL 23. The ice is wide open and good times await in NHL 23. New gameplay strats let you run on-ice tactics like never before. Customize your players, teams, and tournaments for the richest online multiplayer experiences yet. And now with mixed women's and men's lineups in Hockey Ultimate Team, we're all ready to play. So grab your friends, gear up, and make history in NHL 23. Search NHL 23 to find out more.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Always much appreciated. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. As you can see, I'm back in the hostage room out of Commander's facility, doing the keys and predictions for you. But couple little nuggets before we get going. A couple players who will not play Sunday. Receiver Jahan Dotson still dealing with the hamstring injury. Ron Rivera said he is very hopeful for him practicing next week. So that's a good sign for him. Then linebacker Cole Holcomb, he too won't play because of a sprained left foot. They don't think it's going to be a long-term situation, so he could be back sooner than later. Don't know yet about next week. They sounded a lot more optimistic with Dotson, so that's a good sign for them for next week, not for this week. I think one of the things the other thing along with Holcomb is David Mayo, the other linebacker, not going to play as well. It's only noteworthy because he is Holcomb's backup, but they can throw in John Bostic. And the other thing is Cam Curl can play down in that box area. Last week they used Bobby McCain in the slot a lot. Now, different offenses pose different strategies for the defense, but they do have some flexibility there. They can go to that five-man defensive front, which is at times, not always, but a de facto 3-4 at times. So they do have some options there, but I think losing Holcomb will hurt. But they do like how Jamin Davis in particular is progressing. That play he made at the goal line the other day, one of the reasons, if you remember, after the Cam Curl stop that put him at, I think it was third and goal from the one. After that stop, Davis makes a terrific play in the backfield. But the reason he made it is because John Allen and Davis, the way they were aligned, Allen was to his left and Davis is right off over the guard more. Well, they basically did a little stunt, just a mini stunt. But it works because sometimes when guys are doing that in the linebacker spot out of that alignment, they might lean and give it away. Because Davis is so quick and athletic, he doesn't do that. So he gets right to the hole. Allen really sells it as well. That was a terrific play. But anyways, so they're confident in him. There you go. Nothing new on the sale today. I know you're going to hear a lot of names about people who are interested in buying. People are still unsure. Is it going to be the whole team? Is it going to be a partial sale? Then you talk to other people, say, well, would anybody really want to be a minority investor given the toxicity around the Dan Snyder name right now, plus the fact that you're paying a lot of money and you don't have any say. So still more to learn there. We'll get more to that next week. Now, let's get to the keys and predictions. And then after that, I'll be back with ESPN's Kevin Seifert giving you a preview of the Vikings. And I apologize, I wanted to play that earlier this week, but the news about the sale kind of topped everything and pushed that to the side. So I'm combining these two. So keys and predictions, and then ESPN's Kevin Seifert learn about the Vikings. Kevin gives great insight, so please stick around for that as well. Let's start with the keys. First of all, the first key, read it right. I say that because the Vikings like to do a lot of different things with their defense and their coverage. Really what it is a split safety look. So that means one side's going to be playing one thing, the other side's going to be playing a different sort of coverage. You just have to read it right and just know where they're going to go. It's something the Chargers did, for example, last year in the season opener. It's something that they're used to because they've seen it now a couple times. But you still have to read it right, because if you're going to go up to the line of scrimmage with, you have a beater for this coverage on this side, a play beater or route beater over here. If it's a different coverage, you just have to know which side you have to go. That's going to be on Taylor Heineke. There are things they disguise it pretty well. They don't do more disguises than other teams, but they do a pretty good job disguising it. But the Vikings do give up a lot of yards against the pass. I think they're their second worst in terms of yards per attempt. They're second worst. They are 28th in passing yards allowed per game. So it's not a good pass defense, but you do have to get the reads right. Of course, everything's going to start with the run for this team. They do want to control the ball. They know they have to keep the defense off the field. And the way they can do that is by controlling the ball, converting third downs. The Vikings in the last 3 games have held their opponent to less than 80 yards rushing each time. So they're improving as a run defensive unit, but you can still hurt them against the pass. And they do have Patrick Peterson at corner, but he's a guy he's getting up there a little bit. He is grabby. One thing to note, he's grabby, and they know it. But this is also a refereeing staff and officiating crew that calls I think they have one of the highest calls of defensive holding of any crew in the league. So pay attention to that. I know that there's something they're going to tell this crew before the game that Patrick Peterson likes to be grabby. But the other thing is he's obviously still a very good corner, but he will read flat-footed at times. So there are things that they did that they felt they could do, like against Stephon Gilmore last week, that they can do against Patrick Peterson. So he's going to try and anticipate and sit on some routes. So look for a couple double moves, maybe a big play down the field with McLaurin or whomever, but I would watch for that. So that's one thing. Number 2, control Dalvin Cook. Listen, the key, I think, to the Vikings offense will be stopping that run game. In the last 3 games, Cook has averaged 5.53 yards per carry. You need to stop him. He's a dynamic running back. When they get going with running the ball, they can do their bootlegs, the play action, the waggles. All those are things that Kirk Cousins runs well. You can't let him get going. You can't let that offense get going with that. So you need to stop Cook, and you need to do it early in the game. Ron Rivera talked about this on Friday, that it's one thing if you let a big run in the second half, but you need to establish early on that you can stop that run and force them into a different style of offense for a longer period of the game. That starts with Dalvin Cook. When the Vikings have had their worst third down showings in games, it's because teams are stopping the run. So pay attention to that. And then you take away the ability to again, run some of those bootleg actions and all that Kirk does very well. So the last one is bait Kirk Cousins. That's your old guy, right? We know him very well here. We saw what he could do. He's still a good quarterback. He's a viable start. He's a quality NFL starting quarterback. Whatever anybody wants to say about him from the past, that's what he is. And there are a lot of teams that would like to have a Kirk Cousins, including this one. They called on him in the offseason just to see, is he available? They were told no, but it was when they were calling all these teams to see who was available and trying to compile a list of possibilities. Well, he was on that list. You had to be, because he was a guy that maybe is available. And if he is, how would you not look at him? Because he is a quality NFL starting quarterback. But is he top 10? No, but he's a good quarterback. There are things you can do with him. He's good. He's smart. He's tough. He's durable. He's been all that. But he will also make mistakes. And we've seen that. 11 touchdown passes here, 5 picks. Not a high number of picks, but you can maybe get him to do some things. Get him under pressure. The Vikings line has been better lately. So that's a growing, improving unit. So that's something to watch there. But if you can get him under duress, when he's been considered under duress, his completion percentage is 34.5%. Get him in those situations. That's where it stops with stopping Dalvin Cook. Because if you get him in favorable situations, you've got a pretty good receiver out there in Justin Jefferson, who's phenomenal. Let's be honest. Maybe clearly one of the best receivers in the league. He's had, I think it's 3 games over 145 yards receiving. He's a stud. So you can't let him get off. One thing to watch with him is they will throw shorter passes to him than they did last year. Like last year, his average depth of the target was around 12. This year, it's a little more than 8. He is getting more yards after the catch. He's a dynamic player. You don't want to let him get off. But only 2 touchdown catches, both in the season opener. So you want to make sure you control him. But he's also got Adam Thielen. They just added tight end TJ Hawkinson. You also got Cook out of the backfield. So there are things they can do with him. But you want to get Cousins' situation where maybe he doesn't see a defensive back coming over. That's how he's throwing some picks where he clearly didn't see a guy and he forced a pass. Maybe you get him moving a certain way and he throws back across his body. That's happened as well. Put him in those situations where he's got to make those kind of decisions, or maybe force him into mistakes. So that's the other thing. We've seen that here. We've seen that in the stadium, but he's still been a quality NFL starting quarterback. So how does this play out? I don't like the injury situation for Washington still. It'd be nice to see Jahan Dotson back. I do like the mindset of this team. This is a close team, and I don't think you can discount that. And I think this winning streak has continued to feed their confidence. There's something maybe building here. I think this is a game where we see exactly what is building inside Commander's facility. Is this a legitimate playoff contender, or is this a team that won 3 games against teams that aren't playing as well? We'll find out. I do think they're playing better. Give them credit. Taylor Heineke has added a spark here. I think he's a good player for these guys to rally around. But I would like, it would be nice if Cole Holcomb could play and if Dotson could be back. And is Trey Turner going to hold up for a second game? There's still questions that I still have about them. So this is going to answer some. I am picking the Vikings 27-23. My confidence level is not all that high, but I am going to go that way because I think the Vikings are a little bit more proven right now. They are playing well, seem to be an improving team in some areas as well. So I'm going to go there and we'll see. But again, I think we're going to learn a lot about Washington this week. And that's why I think this is a big game for you to watch. Where does this team go? We're going to find out Sunday. That's it from me. Now, I'll be back in a minute with ESPN's Kevin Seifert. He's going to give you a good rundown on the Vikings, talking about Cousins, Kevin O'Connell, all that good stuff. So stick around. Here's my conversation with ESPN's Kevin Seifert.
Need a proactive sales strategy? Check out Factor. They help manufacturing suppliers find new customers, diversify their industry and customer base, and increase their profitability. They've combined proprietary technology with targeted data and smart salespeople to deliver niche opportunities to niche, technical manufacturing companies. If you want to start thriving, learn more at factormfg.com. That's FACTURMFG.com.
Finally, business banking that benefits your bottom line. For a limited time, earn $300 when you open a new business checking account at Live Oak Bank. Designed for new businesses, gig workers, and side hustlers, Live Oak puts you at the center of every decision. With digital access, customer support, and no maintenance fees. Open a business checking account before November 18th to qualify. For full offer details and terms, go to liveoakbank.com/Spotify.
Well, Kevin, I cover a team where people are saying, how have they won 3 in a row? You kind of cover a better version of that, which is 6 out of 7. And even Ron Rivera said the other day, they're flying under the radar, and I don't know how because they're 6-1 and they're pretty good. And I know you just kind of wrote a story about this on ESPN.com. Go check it out. But it's about how, are they for real? So what do you think?
I mean, at some point, your record speaks for itself. Like you can keep asking if a team is for real and are they going to win the Super Bowl? Or are they good enough to win the Super Bowl? But as the record continues to move up, I mean, it just answers the question itself. I mean, they're already 4 games up in the loss column in the NFC North, so it would be an all-time collapse right now for them to not win the division at least, and so that gives you a home playoff game, and then you go from there. But they've certainly had lulls on both offense and defense where they've either fallen behind or let teams get back in after jumping out to a lead. And that's concerning, but, absent being, one of the top 2 or 3 dominant teams in the NFL, I think most of the league is in that spot. But where they've really just excelled and really dominated is just in all the little things that can add up to affect outcomes of games that people don't think about. And the example I keep using is scoring before halftime. Kevin O'Connell is the new head coach here. Made a big point of that when he first got hired, that in terms of game management and game strategy and clock management, that was a really important part of a game. And you can really take control of a game or make it very hard on your opponents if you can score or at least attack in those moments. And they've, at one point, and I think it's still the case, they were leading the league in points scored in the last 4 minutes of the first half. So that's just one example, and there's lots of them, but that's the way they're pulling it off. They're not coming into games where they clearly have a better offense than the other team's defense, or their defense is just much better than the other team's offense. They're battling it out and winning in the margins.
So obviously you brought Kevin O'Connell. There's another guy there who is familiar with Washington fans, even though he hasn't been here for 5 years, but Kirk Cousins.
I don't know who that could be. Yeah.
First of all, does anybody call him Kurt up there? Just out of curiosity.
No, we've gotten his name right. It actually worried me, like when that first came up, that I was going to one day slip and just say that accidentally, and he would not probably find that very funny. And I don't blame him if he was upset. So no, I'm glad I haven't slipped and no one slipped, and we're all calling him Kirk.
How is he progressed there? What do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, and the big question coming in was this was the first offensive minded head coach that he played
Right.
for in Minnesota, and Kevin O'Connell, and would he be able to bring him to the next level with a pretty good set of skill position players around him? And I would say that Kirk has not been much different than what he's been in other years in Minnesota. He's had some good moments, he's had some bad moments, but where he's been really good, and again, this falls back into what we were talking about earlier, is making a handful of really key plays that win the game. In some cases, it's literally the game-winning touchdown pass that he had against Detroit a few weeks ago, in a few seconds left in the fourth quarter. In London, he made a really perfect, about a 40-yard pass on a go route to Justin Jefferson that set him up for the game-winning field goal. In the first quarter the other day, he took off to try to buy himself some more time, realized nobody was watching him, and he just went down the sideline and dove over the pylon and scored a touchdown to give them an early advantage against the Cardinals. And so in between those plays, there's been some ones where you're like, you'd like to see him, at this point in his career, not make that throw or not make that decision. But he's more than done enough to be a part of this 6-1 start for sure.
Do you think people are glad he's still there? Just because I know there was always, from the time he went there, it was always like, do they like him? Do they not? Do they like him? Do they not? Does he clash him with Zimmer? Do you think it's a good situation with him and O'Connell? And I guess, are they still glad he's there?
I think it's a great situation with him and O'Connell from everything I can tell. And the comparison with Mike Zimmer, is an easy one for O'Connell to win because he's an offensive-minded guy and he's a much different personality. And I think a better fit for Kirk personality-wise. And it's not because he's just, a pushover. He's coaching him hard, but they have the kind of weekly discussions and, daily discussions that you would want a quarterback and a play caller head coach to have. And that wasn't always going on in the previous regime. I think people still feel the same about Kirk as they always have. They can't blame him when he makes those key throws, but his one really bad game this year happened to be on Monday night in week 2 against the Eagles. And they had fallen behind really quickly, but in the second half, they had a chance to catch up. And he threw 3 interceptions. I think they were all in the red zone and not good, not like they were just tip passes that he couldn't control. It was, some bad decisions and some bad throws. And so that balanced out any, I think, renewed optimism that people would have that he would take that next step. I've always said that he has a very high floor,
Right.
and he does. And so you can win games with him. Can you win the Super Bowl? I don't know. He hasn't yet. He's shown that he can still have those kind of games that happen to be in this case, happen to be in prime time. But he also has, like I said, indisputably made plays to win games. So where it nets out is I don't think people's feelings about him, however they felt coming into the season, has changed too much in either direction.
And I know you'll end up talking to him on Wednesday, and we're recording this on Tuesday. So do you think at this point that it matters to him coming back here for a game? It's been 5 years, but you've gotten to know him a little bit. I mean, how much do you think it matters?
Well, actually, I did ask him on Sunday about it because we had this weird. I always downplay revenge games, and I just think that's more of a media creation than it is for players. And Patrick Peterson just had a very emotional revenge game against the Cardinals, and I totally underestimated that it would matter that much to him, but it really did. And so I asked Kirk, it's like, is this going to be one that matters to you? And he goes, he's kind of like, I haven't even gotten to there yet, but I think my strategy will be just to not even go there at all. Like I don't imagine not go to Washington, but not go into that discussion, and just view it as an other opponent. They've already played once. I believe they played here a few years ago on a night game, and the Vikings won that game. My understanding is that the crowd in DC has typically been friendly towards the visitor teams in recent games. So I don't know that he's going to face a strong emotional reaction from the Washington fans that are there, or he's going to hear it. And so my guess is that he's a competitor and he would like to beat them. But if he harbors some kind of grudge against them, I'm not aware of it.
And the other thing is there may be 3 players I think that were left from here It's a different coaching staff. It's a different front office.
Right.
It's not the group that decided that they didn't want to pay him initially, and so all those things. And it's a different name and different jerseys. So there's, I know it's the same city, but so when you watch him on film, it's not like you're watching the same team that you played for.
Right. And again, time is probably the biggest factor. It's been, he's now in his 5th year here. And so it's, he went through the process with them. He probably won, that process. He got to leave and he got to put himself in a position where he could be one of the highest paid players in the NFL and pick the spot where he could play. And that's very rare for a quarterback. So, that doesn't mean that that's how he thinks of it. But again, if he has any grudges towards ownership there or anybody that's still left when he was there, or fans there, I'm not aware of it.
The funny thing is, Kevin, like when this team was looking for quarterbacks last offseason, they wanted to check with every team that had a possible availability there or a possible deal. So they actually did call the Vikings about Kirk Cousins. Now, clearly they weren't going to trade him, but I think the people here would have welcomed a quarterback at that level.
Interesting. And that wasn't a terrible idea on Washington's part to make that call, because the Vikings had just turned over their front office.
Right.
Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is the new general manager. Kevin O'Connell's the new coach. The people who brought Kirk Cousins here weren't here anymore. And that wasn't, when you think back to the first press conferences those guys had, they weren't as 100% committal, at least publicly, as they are now, obviously. And part of that was because they had to redo his contract, and they ended up deciding that they thought this core of players was good enough that they didn't want to change quarterbacks at this point. They wanted to see how far it could go. So he's basically locked in as their starter through next year, contract, unless they want to have a big salary cap hit. But in that little interim there, it wasn't, totally out of the question to at least make that inquiry.
What kind of difference has O'Connell made? Again, people are familiar with him here because he was here for a couple of years.
Well, I mean, I honestly, I think the biggest thing is that, and this is not just Vikings, but the league-wide trend is like, there's a real advantage to having an offensive-minded head coach and play caller if they're good at it, because that's the strength of how you can win games. And when I talk about all the things that they do well, the little things, a lot of that is that the play caller and the game manager are the same person. And so he can make decisions on whether he wants to go for it on 4th down or whether he wants to try to run, to start a game based on what he knows about what plays are working, what he has on the menu. And there's it's just more efficient. Mm-hmm. And there's been lots of examples where he's made game management decisions, not based on analytics and you should go for it on 4th down, but because, hey, I got a great play here I know is going to work. And that's why I want to go for it on 4th down. And that's the organic way you'd love to see NFL teams work on game day. So I think he's made a real impact in terms of those sort of micro decisions over the course of a game. And NFL teams tend to go 180 degrees from one coach to the next. And so as sort of old and veteran and crusty as Mike Zimmer was, O'Connell's, happy and positive and quote unquote players coach on the other side. And then, we've seen how those things can sometimes work out and be taken advantage of. We haven't seen that. He's a young coach coaching a very veteran team, and he's soliciting the players' advice, especially guys like Patrick Peterson and Kirk. And he's very smartly, built the whole offense around Justin Jefferson, who we haven't mentioned yet, but that's their best player. He's a receiver, but that doesn't mean you can't run the whole offense through him, and he has. And so a lot of the things that he's done have made it, significant impact on starting the way they have.
With Jefferson, it looked like, I think you had a story a couple weeks ago about the air yards per attempt to him, a little bit lower than traditional, but obviously very productive.
Yeah, and I think O'Connell's quote is, you don't have to throw over their heads to make explosive plays. Mm-hmm. And they very much have been, most of his big plays, except for that one that I mentioned against New Orleans, most of his big plays are like 15 to 20 yard crossers across the middle where they have schemed him open or schemed a pick or schemed something that gets him wide open, and then he's off to the races and turns a 15-yard play into a 25 or 30 or 40-yard play. And so that's what we've seen a lot of. And you want to put the ball in the hands of your best player. What would have been almost 20 years ago, when Mike Tice took over and Randy Moss was the top receiver here, he came up with this idea, this branding called the Randy ratio. We're going to throw to him 40% of the time. And so that worked for a time. And that idea is still very prevalent and necessary. You not only want to make sure you're getting the ball a lot to your top player, but you want him to know that you're working every day, every minute to get him the ball as well.
Last thing offensively, what else? Dalvin Cook. I mean, they've got other weapons, but where are they at with all those guys? And where?
They've been good. Dalvin, he separated his shoulder a few weeks ago. Didn't miss a game, but he's a guy that you have to monitor for injuries. But he's still got that little bit of an explosive bit there. If he makes that one cut and he gets through the line, he can still run pretty fast and run away from people. They have an almost exact duplicate of him in Alexander Madison as their backup, but just a little bit less explosive, but very good backup to bring in. That when they have Jefferson and the other side, Adam Thielen, who probably isn't as fast and as quick as he used to be, but is still very crafty. And I think what Kirk Cousins knows is that that's a guy that doesn't need to have 4 yards of separation to throw him the ball. And so you'll see a lot of contested catches from him. Tight end has been pretty thin. And Irv Smith Jr., who's their starter, has had a couple injuries and most recently an ankle. And so I'm not even sure if he'll play this week. So, but in the big scheme of things, they have plenty of weapons for Kirk Cousins, and that's why they decided to bring him back as opposed to starting over there.
Last thing, how good is the defense?
It's a work in progress. They transitioned from the 4-3 to the 3-4, and O'Connell hired Ed Donatel to be the defensive coordinator. And he sort of he's been a defensive coordinator in the league before, but had been working in the Vic Fangio scheme for a long time. And O'Connell really likes that scheme and thought that was what he wanted to have. And so they basically go into it saying we need to pressure with our front four, with Zadarius Smith and Donnell Hunter especially, and we're going to play zone in the back end a lot. And that's the way they started the year. And when those guys got home, they played well. And when they didn't, there were 15, 20-yard passes available to offenses routinely in that zone. And so they've mixed it up a little bit. They're having Patrick Peterson play a little more press where he's comfortable. And they I think that they've worked very hard to get Zadarius Smith, especially matched up against whoever is the weakest pass rusher, or pass protector, even if that's your left guard or your center. That's where you'll see him line up, and that's where he's done a lot of his damage. So they give up yards for sure, and they've given up some points in some games, and so they can be you can find holes there if you look hard enough.
Kevin, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Great stuff.
Okay, thanks, John.
I'm an adventurous person, but I'm also a careful person. We want to get out there, but we also want to make sure we're safe and our loved ones are safe. Good thing there's the OnStar Guardian app. Safety services right on our phone. We can get roadside assistance. We can share locations with friends and family. We can even get help in a crash in any vehicle on any motorcycle. Finally, something both sides of me can agree on. Adventure safely with the OnStar Guardian app. Download today from the App Store or on Google Play. Be safe out there.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Kevin for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back after Sunday's game against the Vikings with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Talk to you next time.